House in Baltimore weekend, the Kentucky Derby. We got the back end of the draft and the Ravens rookie minicamp, and Luke Jones was out there for all of that stuff, but really did spend his whole weekend with the Baltimore Orioles, who were breaking out orange brooms on the Chicago White Sox. Luke, I mean, we can pick this thing apart, and I think there's plenty of meat on the bone when there'll be time for that. But when they're playing 700 baseball, and Machado's really not hitting the ball, and Trumbo's not hitting the ball, and Davis, these are the good times, right? And on a weekend where they took advantage of a lot of opportunities, even though they didn't play perfect baseball, and certainly the Tillman thing, the Bundy thing, even Miley and on Friday night. It wasn't an easy weekend, and Britain goes to the DL, but all they do is win 2 out of 3 games, and that's all they've done the first month, and I can't argue with that.
Exactly. I mean, and that's where I think you do have some, you feel encouraged that, not that they're going to continue to play at a 667 clip, because, that's incredibly difficult to do anything even remotely close to that, but I think what you take some satisfaction in, besides the fact that they're winning games, is that they haven't been firing on all cylinders. As I wrote at WNST.net, my 12 Orioles thoughts after the 4-0 win on Sunday, who would have thought they'd be 20-10 with Zach Britton and Chris Tillman missing significant time, with Mark Trumbo having 2 home runs, with Kevin Gausman being terrible so far. Just those factors. I mean, forget about anything else. J.J. Hardy not hitting, I don't think anyone is necessarily stunned by that.
But let me say this, too, about them. Other than Bundy, right, no one's been special. I mean, look, we're going to see Zimmerman, who's hitting .435 right now this week with 13 bombs. We're going to see Bryce Harper, who's otherworldly. We're going to see the kid that came over from the Mets a year and a half ago that the Mets didn't want after he wins a World Series, and he would be the best player in the Orioles lineup right now. There's some amazing things going on in lots of places. You don't look at the Orioles stat-by-stat player. Yes, Scope's doing okay, but we expected that. Adam Jones, okay. Seth Smith's been a little surprising. But there's nothing otherworldly or special that stands out other than, Bundy's taking the ball every 5th day. And other than that, it's been a box of chocolates, but they're winning.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the bullpen, I think, has done a nice job considering they haven't had Britton for, the better part of 3 weeks. And certainly not going to have them for a while now. We'll get into the details of that as we continue our conversation. But you're right. I mean, there hasn't been anything that stands out that's been unbelievable. I mean, even Dylan Bundy, he's not striking out a ton of guys, but he's getting the job done. He's pitching. He's just registering quality start after quality start. He's 7 for 7 in that department. I mean, I wouldn't have predicted that. I wouldn't have predicted a 2.17 ERA. But it's not as though he's striking out 13 batters per 9 innings and putting up video game numbers. He's going out there and doing a really good job. Wade Miley, the walks aside, has been pretty solid. Now, as long as he's not taking 2 comebackers in a 3-pitch period on Friday night, which is still one of the craziest. I've never seen anything like that. I really haven't. But you make a good point in saying that you really get the sense that the Orioles, whether 20-10 is real or whether they've, had some good fortune, they've certainly had some bad fortune. You can certainly say that as well, but they're figuring out ways to win, and it hasn't been overly impressive from a statistical standpoint. Their offense has just been okay. They've had their moments here and there. They've had timely hits, but they haven't hit a ton of home runs yet. I think they will, but they haven't to this point. And some of the guys that have really scuffled, Trumbo, Davis, had a home run over the weekend, and looks like maybe he's coming out of it a little bit. But Hardy struggled. I mean, it's Machado until recently was hitting the ball hard, but not getting results. He's coming out of it. He's fine. His OPS now is well over 800, and he's got 21 RBIs at this point, but no one. You're right. You look at the Nationals, and maybe they're a bad example because they have just absolutely clobbered the baseball so far this year.
Boy, we'll get into that in a minute too. You're going to see a good team here this week.
Oh, sure. This will be a really interesting test, for both clubs, quite frankly, because the Orioles have played really well at Camden Yards, but the Orioles they figured it out, and some of it's been contributions from unlikely sources. I mean, right now, Trey Mancini, he's been one of the Orioles' best hitters, and he hasn't even played every day. Had 3 hits and an RBI on Sunday, hit a home run off of a right-handed starter on Saturday. Perhaps a sign that Buck Showalter starting to view him a little bit more as not just a platoon guy, but maybe a guy who's going to be in there on a pretty regular basis. So they've gotten contributions from Alec Asher, Gabriel Yanoa, who was absolutely a godsend for them on Friday night.
100 pitches on Friday night. I mean, it's crazy, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's just they're just figuring it out right now. And the good news is, while you don't necessarily expect some of those contributors to continue doing what they've done, I'm not convinced that Alec Asher is going to be a meaningful part of their rotation or what they do. I'm not convinced that Gabe Yanoa, whether Friday night was a sign of more things to come or just a really nice performance on a given night. The good news is you can expect some of those other things we talked about to get a little bit better, at least some of those things, and you hope then that they're able to continue to win ball games. So I mean, it's really good to see that you can win games when you have guys hurt, you have certain guys not performing well, because it bodes well for the longevity of being able to sustain that over the next 5 months.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter, as well as Luke at WNST.net. He was with the Ravens for part of the weekend, but with the Orioles more than that. And, the Dylan Bundy thing every 5th day, right? I mean, this is, it's starting to feel more automatic. And, I've talked to a lot of the Nationals people here this week about Strasburg, that once you've had that sort of thing happen early on, I mean, I think there was a period of time we were worried about Manny Machado's knees right after he blew one after the other out. And I think there's that time and that distance that goes into it that says, yeah, this guy's right. And in the case of Bundy, these are building blocks, much like Tillman on Sunday, that 5 days from now we'll have another building block on him. And if he's still right in August, we'll say he's right. I mean, there comes a point where you get more comfortable. With Bundy, I think we're getting a lot more comfortable. I think Buck's getting a lot more comfortable, too, as far as distance, what he can do, what he can't do, what he's capable of doing. And, what he's capable of doing right now is winning every game that he takes the ball every 5th day. His stuff's that good.
Yeah, and the thing that I really like is, we talked about it with his, the start he had a couple weeks ago where the velocity was way down. It ticked back up as the start went on, but you're starting to wonder, you're thinking, okay, are they pushing him too hard? Does he need an extra day of rest here or there? Is the pitch count going up a little bit too high? And what have we seen since then? The velocity's been back up. He's not throwing in the mid-90s, and quite frankly, I'm not sure he needs to throw in the mid-90s, because the thing that impresses me more than anything about the velocity or overwhelming stuff, I think he just has such an aptitude for pitching. He pitches out there. I mean, remember, we're still talking about a guy who's 24 years old and just went over last month, just eclipsed the 300-inning mark for his professional career. Not major league, professional career. That's not a lot of experience, and it's really rare to see someone who comes out of high school, never pitched in college, gets hurt, obviously, his second professional season, undergoes Tommy John, came back, had the shoulder issue 2 years ago, and you're just, you're really wondering at that point, is he ever going to realize his potential? And maybe some of those injuries have prevented him from being the guy that he was straight out of high school in 2012, when maybe he would sit in the mid-90s and touch 97, 98. But I just see a guy who really understands what he's doing out there, and he uses his pitches well. I think he sequences very well. I'm getting the sense, talking to people around the club, that he's really someone who prepares, talks with his catchers.
He's a grown-up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in that way that Messina was, right?
Yeah.
In that way that you kind of have to be if you want to carry a 2 ERA around in the middle of the year.
Exactly. So, I mean, you really like seeing that. Now, and you just said it, I mean, it really comes down to you hold your breath because he hasn't pitched a whole lot, because he's been through a lot physically, and you hope that the Orioles do what they need to do, whether it's getting him an extra day of rest every now and then, whether it's only letting him throw 90 or 95 pitches every now and then.
Well, dude, he's leading the team in innings by a lot, and that doesn't appear to be changing as he becomes, the H word, right? I mean, if they're going to make him the horse means take the ball, go 6 2/3, 7 1/3, occasionally 8, once in a while 4 or 5, and go out there and give us a chance to win. I mean, 5-1, 45 innings, 37 hits. The WHIP is there, the ERA is there. The most starts on the team. I mean, he's looking like an all-star game starting candidate, quite frankly, right now, right?
Yeah, everything about it checks off. Like I said, about the only thing you look at and say, the strikeout numbers haven't been great. How much is that worth? I mean, there's something to that. I think when you look at the long haul, if you're not missing a ton of bats. But at the same time, I still, more than anything, I'm just wildly impressed with his mental approach. I think he's tough out there on the mound, and I think he really has an idea of what he wants to do, pitch to pitch, hitter to hitter, inning to inning, and it's really worked out well for him. And the thing that, going back to the strikeouts, because you know me, I talk about velocity and how many swinging strikes a guy gets and contact percentage, all that different stuff. If you go back and look at him last year, even in April and May when he was just pitching out of the pen, shorter stints, the velocity really didn't start climbing until he got to late May and into June and July. I'm just wondering, and we don't know because we haven't seen this kid enough, you wonder if he's the kind of guy who starts out a little bit slower from a velo standpoint in the first month and a half, 2 months, and as it warms up, maybe he gets going a little bit more. So I still wouldn't be surprised to see the velocity tick up a little bit more as the year goes on. But he has just been a lot of fun to watch, and when you consider that Chris Tillman makes his season debut on May 7th, and Kevin Gausman has an ERA over 7 on May 7th. You get an idea of how critical Bundy has been to their success to this point, and it's just every fifth day it's absolutely becoming an event that when he's pitching, you want to be in front of your TV or at the ballpark watching him.
Luke, I guess the other part of this thing here when it comes to the rotation that is glaring to me, and I always say Messina, and I know we talked about Bedard a little bit last week as well, is that having an ace is something over the last 5 years. You can say a lot of things about the Orioles. We can talk about Miguel Gonzalez in here and Arrieta running around Chicago and all the guys, including Tillman, who's been a part of this. Tillman was never like really the ace in that way that when you're going to see Scherzer and Strasburg and Price and Sale last week and those kind of guys. Bundy's the first guy that we're going to be in that conversation with about being that kind of guy here because he's pitching like that guy in a way that really nobody else has. I mean, this team has won a lot of games without having that kind of a pitcher, and I think in modern baseball, that's really hard to do this with a whole bunch of 3s and 4s, which is pretty much the way this franchise has operated the last 5 years.
Well, I think that a lot of it lends itself to the fact that they have leaned so heavily on their bullpen, but they've had to do that.
And their offense and the long ball. I mean, they've had other strengths that's allowed them to win 90 games.
They have, but I think you're selling Chris Tillman a little short, and certainly he's not in that Scherzer or David Price category. Certainly not Clayton Kershaw or anywhere close to the elite of the elite. But Chris Tillman, if you think back to. Go back and look at his final 20 starts of 2014, and you'll see how darn good he was. I mean, he's as close as they've had to an ace. But you're right. I mean, Bundy, because of his age, because of his makeup, because you hope as he gets further away from the injuries, and you knock on wood that he stays healthy, that there's a higher ceiling there. I think everyone would agree with that. But it does speak itself. It does speak to how the Orioles have tried to operate. I mean, they've tried to, they haven't been able to develop a whole lot of pitching. I mean, even Kevin Gausman and Dylan Bundy, you're talking about top 4 draft picks, fourth overall picks in the draft. I mean, you're not talking about a ton of development there. You're talking about guys who are just extremely talented. So,
Ditto Machado, by the way.
Oh yeah, and look, I mean, it's better than messing it up, and there's been plenty of number 3 and number 4 overall picks that haven't panned out. So I'm not saying that to be critical.
Yeah, somebody out there saying Marlon Humphrey, right?
yeah. Well,
anything is possible. Some people are yelling Matt Elam too, but I mean anything's possible. And I remember for a decade and a half, all the Orioles' first-round draft picks were turds, always, right?
Well, look, Matt Hobgood, Billy Roll. I mean, there are certainly some of them.
By the way, we're going to be competing with Matt Wieters and Jason Worth and Matt Albers.
Yeah, Matt Albers, go figure. Still ticking, still doing surviving in the major leagues somehow, I suppose. But getting back to your point, I mean, it's clear that starting pitching hasn't been this team's strong suit. I mean, they haven't developed it. They haven't spent on it. The money they have spent hasn't really panned out. So it's clear that they've constructed their roster and they've been built for success around their bullpen and power hitting and good infield defense. So it's really interesting to think what the possibilities could be if, assuming Dylan Bundy continues down this path to some degree, and to expect him to pitch in the low 2s for an ERA, that's probably unrealistic. I mean, this kid's still really young, doesn't have a lot of experience. He's going to go through some bumps in the road, there's no doubt. But you hope when that happens that Chris Tillman, who I thought looked solid, albeit after a really rough start over the first couple batters where he threw 7 straight balls to begin the game. His velocity was okay. It was right around 90 miles per hour. That's not optimal Tillman, but that's good enough. And you really hope that Kevin Gausman gets himself straightened out because he's too talented not to get himself straightened out. At least to be a somewhat better than what he's been. So you're hoping once Bundy maybe cools off a little bit that those two guys are ready to pick up the slack, and we'll see where Wade Miley is. And at this point, as I mentioned, guys like Alec Asher and Gabe Yanoa, it puts a lot more heat on Ubaldo Jimenez to pick it up. Or at this point, being in the final year of his deal, I think you'll see the Orioles a little more willing to maybe not cut him outright, but certainly take him out of the rotation if he's not going to get the job done.
All right, the Washington Nationals come in. Anything you want to say? Because we'll be talking about them on a day-by-day basis here, but, hard to argue against them being amongst the best teams in baseball, and I know the Yankees and the Cubs played into the middle of the night on Sunday, and the Yankees have gotten off to a nice start, but the weird part about the Nationals, and we haven't seen this kind of thing in a long time, all the rest of those teams stink, right? I mean, this is sort of like the Carolina Panthers a few years ago in their division, right? I mean, you sort of run away and hide. Maybe the Patriots have been doing that for a decade and a half, but it's very weird in baseball. The Nationals might win 105 games, and the next team there might not win 81, right?
Yeah, I mean, the Mets are a complete dumpster fire right now. Injuries, Syndergaard's out for the foreseeable future with the injury. They suspended Matt Harvey over the weekend. Cespedes has been hurt. I mean, they are a mess right now. The Phillies, they're a team that I could see being respectable by the end of the season. Not from a record standpoint, but I think that they're young, and I think they'll be playing better baseball as the year goes on. But they're a non-contender. Miami hasn't been very good. The Braves are still very much in rebuild mode. So, the Nationals are already running away from everyone. I mean, they enter the week with a 6.5 game lead over the second place Mets, who are going the wrong direction. So, I mean, that's just the thing that's surprising. It's one thing for them to pitch. I think everyone expected that, even if they have some issues with the back end of their bullpen. I think they're a team that's going to be in the market for a legitimate closer before it's all said and done. But we know about the starting pitching. Their offense has been incredible. You mentioned Ryan Zimmerman. I mean, this is a guy who was their first franchise player. He's the first face of the franchise down in D.C. And really for the last 4 or 5 years, I mean, he's had injuries, hasn't played well. He's had all kinds of different things going on with him. And he's just been absolutely pulverizing the ball. So you go down that lineup, which now includes Matt Wieters, and certainly his return to Camden Yards will be a big story. I know, it was already scheduled over the weekend that he was going to meet with the media even before the clubhouse opened up Monday afternoon. So the bells and whistles there, and you would think he'll get a nice ovation. He should. He was a good soldier for the Orioles for a number of years and a big part of the turnaround. But that's a team that right now certainly not seeing anyone in that division is going to challenge them unless the Mets really turn things around in a hurry and get some of these guys back healthy. Even though some of those guys are going to be out for a while. But you said to me, they're the best team in baseball right now. I'm a bigger believer in them, at least for the regular season. Now,
well, they're going to get help with the bullpen
when they get to the post.
They're going to be a different team, I think. They're going to go get 2 or 3 relief pitchers based on what I can see.
Yeah, and certainly you would think they have the resources there. And it's unfortunate for them. They lost Adam Eaton, who was such a big off-season addition for them. So that hurts. But they have Turner. They have so much talent, veteran and young talent. That it's going to be, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. And if anyone's going to challenge the Cubs in the National League, and I know the Cubs are off to a mediocre start, but I'm not believing in the Cincinnati Reds. I'm not believing in the Cardinals or Pittsburgh or any of those teams really challenging them when it's all said and done. But if anyone's going to challenge the Cubs in the NL, I think it's the Nationals. And hey, when you're 21-10, you kind of deserve that title, plus 53 run differential. They've scored more than anyone in baseball. Yankees have certainly, and the Yankees did a number over the Cubs. Cubs heroics against Aroldis Chapman Sunday night, or at least their attempt at it, notwithstanding. I like the Nats right now as the best team in baseball, and this will be a nice test for the Orioles, and should be a lot of fun because, hey, let's not sleep on the Orioles. Maybe not all the numbers don't look pretty top to bottom, but they're right behind them in terms of the win-loss column, and that's all that matters.
Some of the parts, and I would say this, there aren't going to be many times when the Nationals and the Orioles are going to get together both playing 700 ball, right? This is unique. It's a unique matchup early in the season. They used to play these games in June in these interleague. Now they play them kind of whenever they want. This is kind of a comfortable, interesting time for these teams to get together, I think.
Yeah, and really that's kind of been the case for the last 4 or 5 years now. It's been fun to see, and maybe they both weren't playing at this kind of clip, but both these teams have been really good over the last 5, going on 6 years now. It's been fun to see for the longest time. Orioles, Nats on Masson, and they'd have the dual broadcaster booth, and it was all so contrived. It was so because neither of these teams were any good. So for them to get together now and play, not that it's necessarily a budding rivalry, and certainly not anything like what we saw with the Orioles and Red Sox over the last couple weeks. You hope nothing like that. Let's keep the focus on baseball, please, if we don't mind. But it's just been fun to see that. And now with Matt Wieters going over to the D.C. side, it probably adds a little flavor there. Certainly a guy that so many of the Orioles are very fond of, and a very strong relationship, and be fun to see them reunite and see him on the opposing side now.
You can find Luke, Baltimore Luke, out on Twitter, and, of course, tweeting at WNST. And if there's any breaking news at all, you'll get it first on our WNST text service. Luke's got that handled as always. You can also email him, Luke at WNST.net. You can find me out in the Bayou Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. It is easy to find us, easy to find me, running around with the hockey team, watching basketball, getting ready for the race, trying to have a little fun here as spring has sprung. You'll want to check out my act out on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and anywhere the internet is served. And, of course, we'll be serving you up in London and Green Bay and Nashville this year. If you're a Ravens fan, our road trips now on the market and the best pricing. The deals are huge, bigly. They're wonderful. You can email me, nasty@WNST.net, to learn more about that. We'd love to take you. We've taken over 18,000 people on the road with us. Come with us to London. Come with us to Green Bay or to Nashville. Meanwhile, I'm just trying to get through the week here. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.